The United Kingdom is the only major Western European country to never have a powerful communist movement. Historically, Britain has produced Marxist historians, Marxist theorists, intellectuals of all stripes, but rarely a Marxist leader. In times of crisis, the possibility of a movement reared its head, only to be dragged back down to insignificance time and time again, never making significant political gains beyond a handful of scattered council seats, a few trade union leaders here and there, and even fewer MPs. Marxist-Leninists and their enemies went the way of splits, splinters, infighting, and marginalization, seen as out of touch with British traditions and social realities. Communism in today's Britain finds itself relegated to universities, minor Labour Party pressure groups, and elitist reading groups, removing itself from the workplace far before wholesale deindustrialization redefined what it means to live and work in the UK. And now, as we accelerate into the new era of hyperfast communication, artificial intelligence, and the determinacy of data over profit, remaining communists and socialists in Britain rage against history, finding bedfellows with liberal reactionaries and metropolitan intellectuals, rather than the dispossessed and deindustrialized working class in our country's periphery, or the urban construction, sanitation, and maintenance workers, who increasingly hold a determinant position in our national economy, but are left without their own independent political voice. The new post-industrial era has redefined the relationship between urban and rural. Former urban industrial centres like Rochdale have become qualitatively rural in comparison to the fetid megalopolis of London, as Labour and Tory alike scramble to placate the increasingly angry ruralised masses, while serving ultimately the interests of professional managerials in the urban core. Labour's red wall, lost to the Tories in the last general election, have not been satisfied by the right's faux populism, and while opportunists appropriate tired old Labour policies and talking points to placate these new uneasy constituents, coasting unsteadily on the waning Brexit mandate, Labour's intellectuals tear each other apart between the forces of a stale post-Blair political establishment and the urban leftist holdovers of the Corbyn years, neither able to reconcile themselves to the new reality. Labour do have a good chance in the upcoming election, their strategy so far to be quiet while the Tories embarrass themselves in the twilight years of the Brexit era. But this so-called strategy leaves the working class with nothing, not a shred of hope for a competent or bold Labour government to address the existential economic concerns of our age. Labour under Jeremy Corbyn reacquainted the British people with the term socialism, dragging it from academia into the headlines. Socialism was on the lips of every man, woman, and young adult in the country. The spectre re-emerged and was vanquished by its own proponents. The urban left in momentum and remnants of New Labour continually pushed Corbyn to embarrass himself, to renounce his principles, and to liquidate his socialism. His socialism went from reindustrialization to the World Economic Forum-backed Green Agenda, from the promotion of national solidarity and the common good to that of antisocial partial interests, the promotion of unpopular minority interests, disconnected and antagonistic to those of the broad majority of the population. Corbyn carried the torch of Bennite socialism, and in the course of his leadership, extinguished it. Principled old Labour politics, rooted in Christian morality, reindustrialization, the common good, and an aversion to the domination of foreign powers, world financial cartels, NATO, was all thoroughly rooted out of the party by those in Corbyn's shadow cabinet and advisory team, along with his sycophantic militants in the Socialist campaign group and Momentum. Those of us who still maintain the necessity of building a meaningful socialist politics must make a clean break with the erroneous and misguided mess of 2010 socialism, strive to understand ourselves and our project in its uniquely British context, and to fight for a socialism with authentically British characteristics that can steer us through the tumult of this new era. To begin an outline of how we might work to build our socialism, how it might be consolidated, we'd be remiss not to look at the most successful socialist country in the world, the People's Republic of China. Chinese Marxist Yi Jianming elaborates what the Chinese form of socialism is, why it works, and how it ought to conceive of itself, explaining it thus: The theory and practice of contemporary socialism with Chinese characteristics should be a creative continuation of Marx's history and logic that transcends Western centralism under new historical conditions in terms of the path of social development. Contemporary Chinese social development can neither follow the path of development in Western capitalist countries nor the so-called unique social development path that is separate from or unrelated to capitalism, but must and can only take the road of developing Chinese socialism by harnessing the logic of capital, that is, the road of socialism with Chinese characteristics. Only through the control of the logic of capital can all the positive results created by the capitalist system be learned, and thus can the construction of true socialism be carried out. Here, Yi makes it clear that, in order to maintain the concrete achievements and benefits of capitalism, namely expedient economic growth, development, improved quality of life, abundance of food production, the task of socialism in any given country is to subordinate the logic of capital to a higher social logic, determined by the particular and discrete national and popular realities emanating from the people of a given nation and their history. In the centuries following Marx, the interweaving of general social and economic life with the state, the intensification of intercourse between individuals, families, and the forces of economic regulation and determination has leveled the political, economic, national, and spiritual fields, folding them into a retrieved and reconstituted general social field, one that is captured and regulated by banksters, asset managers, globalist technocrats centered in the lofty ivory towers of the City of London, Wall Street, and Davos. If we are to begin moving towards a socialism with British characteristics, it requires us to realign our perspectives, investigate who our enemy is, how they operate, as well as reconsidering where we locate the origins of our political tradition, how the real movement has been borne out historically, as well as learning from contemporary political parties like the Communist Party of China, who represent at this time the most advanced force in building socialism for the 21st century. Paradoxically, the primary force holding back Britain's development is our own historical success. The great transformations which Britain undertook in the Victorian Industrial Revolution now weigh a heavy burden on our country. Under our streets are hundreds of pipes, wires, sewage tunnels, now mostly redundant and crumbling, all manner of clutter laid down over the centuries since industrialization, which at one time made our industrial centers thriving, accelerated rapid technological progress, and now serve only to impede the next phase of economic development. This can be extended to our political system as well. Centuries of laws, edicts, rulings, land ownership rights, parliamentary customs, etc., all inhibit our capacity for growth and development, and the current ideological fixation on devolution, the heaping of bureaucracy on top of bureaucracy, the mindless fascination with passing law after law after law, legislative bottlenecks, and useless conflicts between various state administrative bodies, all contribute to a political and economic deadlock. This stagnation is compounded by our political class's commitment to the World Economic Forum's degrowth agenda, which aims to actively suppress and contain economic progress for the ends of a strange and deeply anti-human ideological commitment, totally at odds with the interests of the majority in Britain. The necessity for legislative revolution alongside a revolution in the productive forces are intimately bound. In China, the central legislature can go weeks without passing new laws. The desire to pass law upon law upon law upon law is the mark of an insecure political class desperately trying to maintain legitimacy. And what gets left by the wayside is governance, the imperative to lead. Bureaucracy ultimately is an impediment to good governance, a frictious and immobile political class that grows in quantity and shrinks in quality. In the Soviet Union under Joseph Stalin, as well as in China under Mao, there was a concerted effort to curtail the growing bureaucratic class and to streamline governance. In the USSR, this failed, resulting in Nikita Khrushchev's coup and the formation of a dictatorship of clerks not dissimilar to that of modern Britain. Whereas in China, the anti-bureaucratic popular forces within the government won, and today China thrives under a streamlined and efficient communist government. What communism means on the level of administration is effective, good governance, and on the economic level, the unleashing of the productive forces. These two factors in tandem with each other, the smashing of bureaucracy and the unleashing of economic capacity, represent the fundamental premise of socialist politics, and therefore must become the primary political proposal of an independent working-class political party in today's Britain. Streamline governance, streamline production for the ends of the common good. That is the true meaning of communism, against any heady obfuscations by so-called Marxist intellectuals. If you were to ask a self-described communist in the UK today to explain the origins of British socialism, most likely they'd be at a loss. Perhaps they would describe the foundation of Labour, or the Owenite cooperative movement, or other utopian socialist projects. The more astute amongst them would perhaps mention the English Civil War and the radical Protestant sect known as the Diggers, led by religious reformer and militant Gerard Winstanley. The Diggers, disregarding the edict of the landowners, forced the reopening of enclosed land, permitting its use for the maximal benefit of the majority of people, an affront to the remnant Ancien regime still in de facto command of post-revolutionary England. They called on Anglo-Saxon liberty, describing their struggle as a continuity with the ancient fight against Norman occupation. Seeing the common people of England by joint consent of person and purse have cast out Charles, our Norman oppressor, we have by this victory recovered ourselves from under his Norman yoke. Gerard Winstanley. As Marx writes, men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. Winstanley understood that the revolution in England against Charles Stuart had for the first time opened the possibility of an authentic overturning of class domination, articulated in the language of Anglo-Saxon revolution. Yet, as events unfolded, this task proved impossible to satisfy in his own time. Completing Winstanley's populist mission becomes possible only in the new era. An independent working-class party must propose a policy of land reform, giving the people of Great Britain a stake in the soil of their own country, to reap the economic benefits of our land, and to solve the crisis of rootlessness and alienation which plagues the dispossessed majority of this country. Reinvigorating industry alongside a comprehensive land reform strategy would ensure that maximal economic prosperity can be enjoyed by the working majority of Great Britain. Today, enclosure is absolute and has extended far beyond land to incorporate so-called intellectual property. Every conceivable thing has become bound up under the ownership of asset managers and the globalist-led bankster state. Socialist politics in Britain means first and foremost land reform and intelligent economic development, to chart our own course as a nation, to secure self-reliance in all respects. Only by achieving economic self-reliance can we maintain national independence, to enter into the new era untethered to the failing European and Atlanticist projects. First becoming apparent with Winstanley, we chart a tradition of British socialism tracing back as far as the foundation of Western thought itself, as far back as the Book of Genesis. Be ye fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth and multiply therein. To be fruitful and to bring forth abundance. Winstanley's breaking of the enclosures, his resistance to the unnecessary brackets and bottlenecks limiting human nourishment and economic development, grounds itself firmly in the Christian tradition of Great Britain. To follow in this tradition is therefore to locate where and how the Norman conqueror reappears in our present socio-economic environment, to find that which inhibits our liberties and our economic development for the ends of greed and special interest against the working class majority. The degrowth agenda, centered in Davos at the World Economic Forum, is for us a new Norman invader, struggling tirelessly to halt our economic progress, turning towns like Rochdale and other former industrial powerhouses into weakened, impoverished, powerless hamlets. The economic imperative of our current new era is today to unmask the foreign influences on our economy, to smash the enclosures placed on us by our self-appointed masters, to direct economic development for our own sake, for the sake of the great mass of the working class, to improve quality of life, to decrease time spent working and increase spending power. All of this is possible with a comprehensive land reform strategy and the decoupling of Great Britain from the parasitic World Economic Forum and the clearing out of the City of London of its heirs to the Norman conquest. Only then will we be able to build an economy which might not only survive the new era, but thrive in it, reaping all the manifold rewards made possible by rapid technological acceleration, rather than being left behind in its wake. How do we define the new era? Increasingly, the US-led Atlantic Alliance is breaking down, with fractures appearing most acutely on issues like Palestine and Ukraine, and an emergent multipolar order is rising in the death throes of America's hegemony. All the while, technological development is reaching a fever pitch of intensifying acceleration. Ultimately, the new era is the unknown, the dangerous, the exhilarating, and the inevitable, filled with possibilities only for those who shed the brackets of the old, failing order. To quote Oliver Cromwell, "No one rises so high as he who knows not whither he is going." The economic and social order of the day cannot be readily understood according to outdated, failed schemas. It must be understood from the vantage of active engagement, by participation in the already occurring real movement. So what now? How do we begin to follow this path? The truth is, we already have, and have been for a long time. From the intensifying interconnectedness of countries via world financial markets and social information networks, to the abandoning of gold-backed currency and the increased authority and determinacy of central banks and asset managers, we have been under the yoke of a kind of objective socialism that has been in construction in this country and in the world since around 1945, but can be found in germ at the formation of the first joint stock corporation and the cartels of the 19th century. In fact, even Thatcher's privatization was not an abandoning of, nor a reaction against, post-war Labour social democracy, but its intensification, its extension beyond the limits imposed by the social democratic state, the emergence of financialization and managerialization of the economy being possible only in conditions of major legal, political, economic interconnectivity, the folding of money relations into legal relations, and the primacy of the Bank of England as chief conductor of our economic affairs. The point is this: if an objective socialism is already present in the constraining of the logic of capital to the social by way of the legal, albeit by forces for whom the common good is not an objective, then the declaration of a socialism with British characteristics means, first and foremost, striving to expose and unmask our so-called capitalism as in reality socialism in drag, to argue for an adequate, popular political form to match the objectively post-capitalist content of our economic system. The task is to bring about a political form worthy of unleashing the potential of this country against the bracketing imposed by the elite, a form grounded in the soil of this country, to root out the mystification which surrounds political language and make socialism authentic and truly populist again. Only socialism with British characteristics can bring Britain, the British people, to their full potential. It is time to ready ourselves and to rise to the challenge of the new era.